Hello. I'm making this video because I realized that in my last video I was talking about my half marathon experience where I had the seizure or partial seizure. And it was really annoying and I had the opportunity to do another half marathon. I think it was 2 weeks after that. It's been a while since that video. And I wanted to update and say it went extremely well. I made the adjustments that I needed to make, and I now feel very comfortable doing that distance without any issues at all. And so, yeah, that was quite a milestone. The only issue I have now is my motivation to run. um, my motivation to run is has been dampened somewhat. So I don't enjoy it as much anymore because I had those goals I wanted to achieve. And so now what I'm doing is I'm doing an experiment with ketone esters, and this will be for at least 6 months. And I'm going to do some baseline tests, and then I'm going to and it tests for a bunch of different things. And then periodically, I'm going to repeat those tests to see what happens metabolically through those markers that I'll be testing for. And I can show you the product actually. Probably make it better if I do that. Then you know what I'm talking about. So I have quite a lot of it. It's the original ketone. And it's very potent. You have to take it in a very specific way. So that's what I'll be doing. And it comes in, I haven't opened it yet. It comes in these bottles. It doesn't have any additives or flavorings or anything like that. So it's a very pure product, and that's important to me. I don't want any salts or anything that's going to confound what I'm aiming to do, what I'm looking at. So yeah, that's an interesting experiment. Another thing is I've been doing some research on cancer clusters and finding out some more interesting things. There was an interesting epidemiological study that came out of Canada, and I'm going to be writing about that because it's found an interesting association between ultrafine particles in the air that you can't see or smell, and development of particular kinds of brain cancer. And epidemiology is easy to criticize, but in this study was very, very thorough in taking away any noise, I like to call it, any kind of factors that could cloud the data, let's say, like economic status, socioeconomic factors, and location, and all of the mechanisms have been identified, and it's a very rigorous methodology that they used. So, yeah, that's an interesting study that I'll be writing about in my Substack. and explaining the mechanistic data that they have for that. So it's not just population data, it's combining that with the mechanisms behind the exposures that they're looking at in these specific regions among a ridiculous number of people over a ridiculous number of years. So, yeah, it's quite thorough. And yeah, so those are the two big things I'm focusing on now. Over the last few days, I've been a bit run down. You can see it in my eyes. You can always see it in the eyes. Some days where I've had a run where I've been in a really good routine, I don't get this kind of effect in my eyes. My skin looks fresher and I feel better. And one of the things I'm looking at with the case study I'm doing, the experiment that I'm doing with the ketone esters, is looking at my sleep. So I should get deeper sleep and just generally better quality sleep with that. I just need to think about the best times to take it, because you can actually take the ketones before sleep, and it's supposed to improve your sleep. That's the claim and the anecdote, I guess, but remains to be tested. I'm also writing up a meta-analysis, or like a review on ketone esters specifically and non-communicable diseases. That's a very big project that won't be finished until May next year. And then I'll hope to get it published as soon as I can, because I feel like the applications for these things are vast and fascinating, actually. Because yeah, it's so vast and so broad. Where do you start? So writing a review on it's quite a challenge, because you're speculating as well as commenting on, providing commentary on what has already been done, and then speculating on what can be done in future, and looking at the mechanisms. Mechanisms is always important to look at. And yeah, in regards to the exercise, I need to make it more fun again, because I'm not enjoying the running anymore. I think part of that is the changing of the seasons, and it requires more motivation to go out there when it's cold and wet and dark. I get really affected by the changes in light, but I'll be doing some infrared saunas and things like that to help with that. And I have places I can go to for that. So I used to have like an infrared device that I would look into, but I don't have that anymore. Yeah. But how I verify the things that I'm doing is I always have a bunch of tests for inflammatory markers and general metabolic health, and also just the eye test, seeing how you feel and looking literally at the eyes. Because for me, that's the eyes and the skin are my main markers for that. Brian Johnson, I think that it's interesting, but I'm not too sure on some of the things. I think sometimes you can restrict too much, and I was guilty of doing that. I think he's largely plant-based as well, and I don't think that's the best idea for everyone. I know some people who do really well on plant-based diets, but yeah, it's interesting. I don't really. Um, I think how you how you look naturally is actually a good marker, and I know that Brian Johnson does things like inject fat into his face, and if you have to do something like that to look younger and healthier, maybe that's not such a great thing. I don't know. But also, yeah, I don't know. But I am thinking more about things I wasn't interested in before, in terms of as an identifier of health. So just simple things like visuals, aesthetics. I think it's okay to have a few wrinkles and grey hair and have like, there's a look, the skin can look even if you have a few wrinkles can look healthy and can look more glowing, and you have enough collagen in your skin through collagen that you can ingest. Not really a fan of these collagen powders. I think you can get the collagen in naturally through diet. And anytime you make something into a powder where you're processing it, there's for me, there's just a lot of questions about quality and purity, and if it's contaminated with anything, or even just the quality of the product, really, mainly. So I'm quite skeptical of collagen products. I would prefer to just get it naturally from the diet. And I try and eat meats that have lots of connective tissue, because I just think that's a good idea for the glycine in particular, but also things like collagen. And I like to wait for it to cool because I really like the jelly, the gelatin, the jelly that you get from roast lamb and these kinds of things, just cooked for a long time and then leave it to cool. I actually also find it more satiating and more satisfying to wait until it's cooled down, even if it's the day after. I actually enjoy it more. Kind of like a healthy version of if you ever well, I'm looking back in my past when I was a student and I'd have leftover pizza or Chinese, and then you eat it. You just eat, yeah, you eat it the day after, and it actually tastes really nice. Things like that, but yeah, in a healthy way. Having the lamb like that, I just really like. Sometimes I find a similar thing with eggs. Just if for whatever reason I have an egg dish which um, has cooled down, I find it more satiating when it's cooler and the fat solidifies. So maybe that's partly why it's more satiating, because it's more like you're eating a more solid thing. And I often wonder about things like if you ever have a desire for crunchiness. If sometimes if you're on like a carnivore diet and you want this kind of crunchiness, and you can't tolerate things like pork crackling or pork rinds, some people call it, um, which I don't really do well on that. It's more, yeah, prefer ruminant animals. But I do have things like duck. I really like duck. And I'm just thinking in terms of the crunchiness. Sometimes if you have a, say, something like minced lamb or minced beef, and you leave it to cool or you have it in the fridge, sometimes it can have some crunchiness. Or even if you have it in a freezer and you don't leave it to thaw completely, it's kind of like you got like a bar kind of thing. And it's quite satisfying. But yeah, I don't know. I got a similar thing when I used to make protein bars out of insects. I used to do that, and breads and things. People have so many myths, believe so many myths about insects and insects as food, and just the exoskeleton, the chitin or chitin or however you want to pronounce it. But actually, it's not as bad as people like to talk about. Yeah, so going back to these kind of signs of aging, I have I've developed this mature hairline, which is quite high up, but it's not really like a lot of this can be just a natural aging thing that you can't really, you can slow down the rate at which that happens, but the fact that it happens, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Just genetically, you might be. It's just like a natural thing. But yeah, you get people I find in this space who are a bit hypocritical. They might have things like Botox, or I'm not going to name names, but there's quite some quite high profile carnivore and keto people I know who have Botox, and I think you're talking about having all these toxins and things in the diet that shouldn't be there, but then you're injecting them into your face, and that's okay for you. Or you're vocal about not having certain medical products put in you, but then you're injecting toxins into your face to relax muscles in your face, and we know that it actually affects the brain as well. So, and also that the skin is an organ that the largest organ that we have that allows things in. So yeah, I don't know. I just see a lot of hypocrites with that, but I don't want to say too much because I don't like saying things like that. I don't like talking about people in these ways. But I'm looking forward to my experiment with the ketone esters, which I will start next week, and make sure to have all those tests. And along with those tests, I'm going to have anthropometric tests done, and I will be taking pictures of my body, which I probably won't share because they'll just be for the study. But I probably won't share because I feel not insecure, but I feel like it's quite. Yeah, I don't feel insecure because I feel really happy with how I look in that way. But it feels like a personal thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some people are very. I'm quite a transparent person, but I uh, I used to be more free with that kind of thing, and my body has changed a lot recently with all the exercise and good food and good sleep and all these things in a favorable way. But I don't like to show that. in terms of saying this is the big a big sign of my overall health, because I don't feel like that that superficial um, way of looking at it is in terms of the like muscle definition and that kind of thing is more important than things like looking at the skin and the face and the eyes. So I always find it interesting when you have this outward, this projection of look at how I look physically and I'm so strong and all of this, which, well, actually, yeah, the strength is important, but having these huge muscles uh, maybe actually isn't the healthiest thing. I know keto and carnivore bodybuilders who are just really big. And I actually think having huge muscle mass like that isn't really consistent with our evolution. I think it's better to have this kind of lean, athletic, functional body. I know that functional is a term that gets bandied about a lot and can be fairly ambiguous, but I try to look at these ancestral uh, populations where they are, yeah, they're quite muscular, but they're not massive. And their muscularity is as a result of how they hunt and how they survive, and it's not uh, eating tons of food and exerting themselves in those very structured ways to look a certain way. They just look good as a result of those things. So I need to think about that more. I think that's partly why I've been enjoying the running less, even though I know that for particularly for distance running, being in a state of ketosis is protective, meaning being keto adapted. Because even if you're not keto adapted over many months, if you're doing long distance, uh, any kind of exercise really, and you've entered it in a fasted state, you will surely enter ketosis at some point. But then you have these people who have the carb refeeds constantly, and that just, yeah, because otherwise they feel like they've hit the wall, and I don't hit the wall. I actually improve as I go on. And with the supplementation of the ketones, I want to optimize that state where past 8 miles, because I found that's the time where my ketones that I have are starting to get used up more, and that's what I rely on most. And so if I can top that up, and it lasts a long time, so if I can top that up with the exogenous ketones and taking this very rapid form where it gets straight to where I need to get to, I find that my limiting factors are often, it's not my fitness levels. So I feel like I could go on all day. It's the brain. And also I get quite bored. If you're running for a long period of time, you get bored. I find that, yeah, past 8 miles, that's when I start to think, oh, I'm bored of this. And through the whole time, my mind wanders and I play games. Because if you do competitive running, you're not allowed to have headphones in. I don't like to run with headphones anyway, but it would be nice to have some kind of distraction. Yeah, you get disqualified if you have to have headphones, which is kind of funny. You get some people with the bone conductor ones. I don't know how healthy that is for you, but uh, even with those ones, I think if you're going for a podium place, you would be disqualified if you had that, which is interesting. I was just reading that and I thought, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, my last half marathon went really well, and I felt like I could have done another half as soon as I finished. Felt like I could have just kept going and done another half, which that's a huge difference to even just the one that was a couple of weeks before that. So I was thinking, have I just caught myself on a good day? Don't really know why that was. But yeah, this comment is interesting about, uh, interesting in a sad way, about that interview that I did with Ivor Cummins. That was, it's funny with these years that come up where it says it was 8 years ago, because I actually think it was longer. And sometimes with the timing of the of when it says the video was published, it's actually longer than that. I actually have a video on here from not long after I was diagnosed. And that would have been almost 11 years ago. I think on the description of the video it says something like 8 years ago or 9 years ago. Definitely it was definitely older than that. So I don't know what happens with that. It's really strange. I know that happens with views, but I didn't know it happened with dates. But yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if it was 8 years ago, but if I feel like it was longer than that. But yeah, just, in terms of, uh, people are being diagnosed with different cancers more, and brain tumors are still classed as being rare, but I don't believe that they are. And I don't think it's that we're getting better at diagnosing them. And you're getting younger and younger people with brain tumors. The most common type of brain tumor is, I believe it's a meningioma, followed by the most common malignant brain tumor. Is meningioma can be classed as malignant too, but generally they tend to be benign. And the most common malignant brain tumor is a glioblastoma. And so I always find it funny in a strange way. I always find it funny how people who have rare brain tumors kind of complain, saying, "Oh, I'm so unfortunate. I have this rare brain tumor that no one knows about." But you'd want to have a rare brain tumor because if you had a common brain tumor, you'd have a glioblastoma. You'd want the alternative? No, you wouldn't. You'd want one of the rare ones. And sometimes not knowing something is good because you could have the best outcome in the world. Yeah, you could have a terrible outcome, but you don't know. You know, ignorance is bliss. Could be a fantastic result. Could be a good thing. It's not always bad. Even within glioblastoma, there's variation. And how we've defined glioblastoma has changed since 2021, I believe. That's when the last change in the classification was. And I wonder if they did that for political reasons or not. Or they just like to, because I know that the reasoning was that it takes into account the molecular characteristics more. So what we used to be termed an anaplastic astrocytoma that had uh, was IDH1 wild type and unmethylated MGMT. So two major markers they look at for prognosis as a prognostic indicator and for treatment resistance. Those two are the main ones that dictated how that classification would now mainly be reclassified as GBM. It's quite a recent thing because that used to be my signifier, if you like. I had what was then termed anaplastic astrocytoma. That was IDH1 wild type and unmethylated MGMT. Under the new classification, it may have been different. But we don't know. It may have stayed the same based on someone's opinion because it goes by consensus of all these different things. They look at the physical characteristics and then they look at the molecular characteristics and then they have this big meeting where people argue about what it is and what it isn't. And then you have kind of like a vote on it where you might have a couple of people who disagree. But then on consensus, they say in the multidisciplinary team meeting, okay, we think it's this because we found a few cells that appear to be this grade. And the grading is based on the proliferative index and the things like the presence of necrotic tissue and even just the appearance of individual cells, how they're shaped. And so, yeah, it's based on a few things. It's not an exact science. Though often they are pretty good when they take into account the proliferative index. So how many people do you know who have these anecdotes online where they say, okay, I have this kind of tumor. But then how many people will then follow on and say, okay, well, what was your KI index score? Because that's actually a reasonably accurate predictor of your prognosis. So you're able to see how quickly those cells are dividing. They give you this scale. If you're higher up in that scale, then that mitotic index, that when it has this mitosis and the cells are dividing, the tumor cells, that's a reasonable prognostic indicator. You can get people with glioblastoma who have relatively low mitotic index readings, but then they're classed as glioblastoma based on how it appears and those molecular characteristics. Whereby often in those situations, you can get a reclassification of a PXA brain tumor, which is it's a benign brain tumor that's usually found in pediatric patients that under the microscope looks very similar histologically to glioblastoma. There have been so many cases where even from autopsy, which is quite sad because they've gone to unnecessary treatment thinking it's this glioblastoma. Yeah, they've reclassified so many of these tumors as PXA. But then there's this other kind of variant of that, whereby if you have, because PXA is classed as like a super benign tumor. However, you can get PXA with anaplastic features or They just call it anaplastic PXA. Anaplastic just means it displays anaplasia, where it's like a more uh, malignant variant of that tumor. It just cells are dividing more. And then so anaplastic PXA behaves can behave super aggressively like glioblastoma, but it's more benign. That more benign counterpart is just like more like a grade 1 or 2 brain tumor. And so it's the context. You don't always get the context with these stories. So even I don't like saying individual people, especially people who are no longer around. But yeah, there's an example similar to that that I can point to. He was quite a big case study of a long-term survivor. But there were lots of mistakes in that individual's care, even from surgery to proposed treatment. Because this is someone who didn't have any of the standard of care apart from surgery, but the surgery could have been done immediately, and they were told that the tumor was inoperable for some reason, but it wasn't inoperable. I can, well, yeah, I won't say who it is, but yeah. All I will say is that, yeah, regarding glioblastoma, it's becoming more common. And I don't think it's because we've improved diagnosis. One thing that we have improved is surgical techniques. So you might get some people in the field who are arguing that we actually are getting better at treating these patients. So the standard of care has some impact. However, most of that I feel comes from improved surgical techniques. We've really come on leaps and bounds with mapping of the. You have these markers that sit around the head, and more sophisticated MRI, and now we pair that with artificial intelligence and robotics, and it's so we are able to have this really fine control, this fine motor control that we couldn't get just through human intervention. And so that's been a huge breakthrough. We also have this drink that you can take before surgery that lights up the cancer cells in the brain, which we didn't have when I was diagnosed. Probably could have taken more out of my brain if that was available. But I don't know what deficits I may have been left with if they tried to do that. So maybe it's a kind of blessing that that wasn't available. Uh, but because I was misdiagnosed anyway, I don't know if I would have had it because, yeah, I was misdiagnosed even when I had my operation, which is crazy to think about. And so the neurosurgeon thought it was okay to leave some disease in my brain because he didn't think it was a brain tumor. But I'm still here for some reason. um, and I have real gratitude for that. Anyway, this is just a long-winded way of saying that my half marathon went really well and I feel super fit and healthy. I find running has become so much easier and exercise in general. And the misdiagnosis was a very good thing. It just messed me up mentally because I wasn't prepared for, even though the brain hemorrhage and the subsequent seizures nearly killed me because they were causing a lot of brain damage and quite substantial. What I've gained from it has been quite incredible, and how I recovered from it. I feel very grateful for that. So I don't take all the credit for that. But yeah, I reflect on it often, and all I can do is to do what I can, is to do all I can do for other people and to share my experiences. I actually spent the day earlier today after my morning run, because I do park run every Saturday. I spent the rest of the day with a very good friend of mine who had a medulloblastoma, and this was many years ago. And she's dealing with the long-term effects of the treatment she had. It's incredible she's still around after what she's been through, but 10 years after her diagnosis, 10 years, she began to have the late effects of the treatment. She became completely deaf. And so I learned some British Sign Language, which is surprisingly a lot easier than I thought, but it's quite sad that it you notice these very long-term effects of the radiation and the treatment, which they don't tell you about, but 10 plus years on, you can get these. You can actually um, mitigate against it in various ways. So all is not lost with that, because it does seem like it does sound like doom and gloom if you someone who's had the standard of care and you may feel regrets after having it. But there are actually things you can do to restore yourself and to reverse some of the damage from radiation. 'Cause we have this idea that you can't do anything and it's hopeless, and just over years it will get worse. But actually, there are things you can do, but you have to do them in the right way. Like things like the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That can be a help or a hindrance, but you need to understand the context in which it's helpful and which is not helpful. Because if you don't do it properly, you can actually cause a lot of problems, not just oxygen toxicity, seizures, but potentially growth of cancer cells, which you want the opposite. You don't want that. You can get like a reawakening through that accumulation of the reactive oxygen species. You want enough stress that it's putting pressure on the cancer cells. And then while you're doing that, because you can't just do the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, you need to do other things to put enough stress on it in the certain metabolic conditions that it doesn't allow it to cause this, to trigger this growth. Yeah, it's quite a difficult balance. When I had hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because I was prone to having seizures in the chamber, I had to build up my tolerance using specific breathing techniques and attaining a very high level of blood ketones and having magnesium to depress my central nervous system enough so that it wasn't having this kind of hyperactive response. And yeah, just allowing the alveoli in my lungs to be very efficient at using the and very tolerant to taking in 100% oxygen in that pressurized environment, so it gets that uptake to the tissues, particularly the brain in that region that I wanted to target. Is actually an extremely difficult thing to do in my case, because I was really pushing it. I was really determined to do it. And if other people explain to me that they've tried similar things, I just think, how? Because I don't know how I did it. I just know that I can be extremely determined, and I can do things that most people can't. But I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. It's more quite the opposite. Actually, it comes from a place of insecurity. And yeah, it's strange how you can drive yourself by being insecure. And you can actually have a kind of confidence in that. I'm confident in how far I can push myself and how much I can suffer. I'm very good at being able to endure great suffering. I feel like I've just developed a mental capacity to deal with that. And that comes through even years before my brain tumor diagnosis, overcoming moments where I've suffered. And so, yeah, you can either let it break you or build you up, don't you? And reframing, I'm very good at reframing and learning. If something bad happens, like say the partial seizure I had about a month ago when I had that half marathon, you can either quit or you can reflect and then say, what did I learn from that? How can I improve? Always reflect on bad things that happen. Like after my mum died, I reflected on how, not just how that affected me, but understanding where that comes from. And if there's anything that I could have done, not in a regretful way, but if there's anything I could have done to improve that situation, because there were lots of mistakes in her care. That's how she eventually died. It's quite sad, but it's not actually a rare experience. Which, yes, it's sad, but medical malpractice is not uncommon. But we can improve awareness of it. Anyway, don't really have anything more to say, but I'm impressed that people actually watch these live videos, because I don't really have a. I'm not the most charismatic person, but I try and deliver information which I think could be useful. And I try to do research that is impactful. And I'm building up to a marathon in April, which I want to try and raise some money for the Forever Young group, which is a research group that I work with. They're called Forever Young. You can look it up, Forever Young and Westminster University. And they do work into metabolic health and ketogenic metabolic therapy. And I'm part of their research looking at cancer. And yeah, actually, with that research group, all of the work that I do with them, I do for free. I don't get paid, even though it takes up a lot of time and effort. But you have to do these things, and you have to sacrifice yourself to then get paid to do the things you want to continue doing on your own. And I'm doing a PhD by publication, so I have to have all of these studies that I'm doing. But it's more meaningful than having some big pharmaceutical company fund my work. Because this is all self-funded work. And I sacrifice a lot. Although I'm no longer sacrificing my my general health, if you like, my mental health in particular, because that's why I moved away from London, and it's been amazing. I love it. Spend every day in nature, and I do try to get out of my comfort zone every day, doing something new or trying a new skill, and yeah, it's just the best thing. But yeah, I do want to try and improve my routine because I've slipped out of my routine a bit, and it's affecting me. Even tiny misalignments, tiny changes seem to affect me. So it's things like even the timing of when I eat. It sounds like such a small thing, but even changing just a few hours later or earlier makes a difference. The meal timing, especially if you're eating the same, if you have patterns where you eat the same thing every day, you are affected by little changes. One thing I like to try and do as much as I can, even if it's just for a few weeks, is to eat the exact same thing every day. But if I'm a bit more active, I add one extra meal, which is exactly the same as one of the other meals. And then, yeah, if I'm less active, I just repeat the standard uh, meals without that extra meal. And so it's uniform, it's predictable, it's always the same. And I find that after 2 weeks, I really adapt. That's when I really start to adapt to that. And then I can continue. And then everything physiologically becomes very predictable. Even things like every bowel movement and how much water you desire and how much salt that you desire and things like this. Just having it as predictable as possible. And the times that you feel sleepy in the evening and these kinds of things. Managing stress and recovery. I think about that a lot more now. I've learned so much over the years. Can't believe it's coming up to 11 years since my diagnosis of the brain tumor. And it's very difficult for me to think about a time before that now. But I feel like I've had different lifetimes. And my current life period has been really moving on from all of that stuff. And it's been more of an afterthought. It doesn't consume my everyday. Sometimes I even forget that people eat things like bread and pasta and these kinds of things. Just because I might have people who come over and visit me and then they look in the fridge and they say, "Nothing's in the fridge. You don't have any food." And then I remember, oh yeah, other people eat all these other things because I might just have some random meats in the and then they say not there's nothing in the fridge, but actually, yeah, there's quite a lot there, but it's just not what they consider like a meal, because a meal for them needs to have all these other foods. But I have, yeah, just at most like 2 or 3 ingredients in all my meals. So, mm. But I do tend to mostly eat uh, eggs and fish. Eggs, fish, and then some type of meat. And then I'll have around that, I'll have things like olives because I can have that unpasteurized olives. And I make yogurt. Started doing that now. I really enjoy. Uh, goat yogurt, goat or sheep. And there's a high fat sheep's yogurt that I used to absolutely love, but I can't find it anymore. It's really annoying because it's the highest fat. It's quite hard to find a high fat goat yogurt or sheep yogurt in this case, but I managed to find it and it was just, oh, it was amazing. My ketones just shot up because I think, yeah, particularly goat, I think has more MCTs in it. I have to check that, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. And it's also a uh, different kind of dairy protein, so it's less inflammatory than cow. And it just has many benefits. And I think it's actually with the cultures that I add to it. L-reuteri is one that I have. That's a huge number of benefits for that gut-brain connection, and also the those tight junctions in the gut. It kind of helps to make them not permeable if you have like intestinal permeability. So if you have any kind of gut issues, it really helps to close that up, for want of a better term, allow it to heal. Because I think most people these days have some degree of intestinal permeability, which is not good. Because then you're allowing things in and out that aren't supposed to, and also into the small intestine, which you don't want. So do you think people are being diagnosed with more IBS and SIBO and all these other things than ever before? So many of this increase in cancer diagnoses come from gut dysbiosis. And there are certain bacteria within the gut that are associated with different kinds of brain tumors. It's quite a strong association. And also with that, you have a reduction in neuroprotective bacteria that have that, yeah, again, have this relationship with that, this bidirectional relationship with the leaky brain, leaky gut phenomena. You have both. And they're interdependent, they affect each other. And so, yeah, you can alter that through making these kind of yogurts. So that's primarily why I do that. And interestingly, as a kind of a food or like a, yeah, kind of it's kind of like a sponge where you kind of you grind up these cultures and then uh, you add it to inulin, which it's a kind of fiber that I can't actually normally digest well. But if it's used in this way to make the yogurts, kind of gets eaten up, for want of a better term, and then I'm able to digest it with no issues. But you'll often get these kind of low carb bars and things, and they say it's all natural ingredients and all of this, but then it has inulin as a main ingredient, or things like chicory root, and I just really don't do well with that, even though some people promote it as being great for the gut. It's the opposite for me. But in this form with the yogurts, I can have it with no issues because it's kind of like, say, for example, if you're cooking with alcohol and the alcohol actually gets burned off through the cooking, so you don't you wouldn't get drunk off of eating a white wine sauce, these kinds of things. So yeah, that's just what I think about it. So that's why the yogurts are okay for me. But another thing with the BHB experiment with the ketone esters that I'm doing, that also has an effect on the gut. Beta hydroxybutyrate has this protective benefit for the gut, and that reaction with the reaction with the brain, that gut-brain relationship. So you think about the butyrate, beta hydroxybutyrate, that in the form of butyrates, the short chain fatty acids, and so in that BHB form, you kind of bypass some of those processes, and you're having that direct effect on the colonocytes, those cells in the colon, and then it's having a host of beneficial effects, which are too numerous to go into detail on, and I probably couldn't anyway because it's it's a level way above my knowledge base or most people's, I think, just an understanding of the gut microbiome and which compounds have beneficial or non-beneficial effects. We only know from a ground level on that. And there's a huge whole universe in that field that we're not yet aware of, which you could just go into so much detail on the effect of the trillions of bacteria that exist within us that control us. Kind of like that film, or those set of films, the comics, Venom. You know how he's like this. What do they call it? Like a symbiote, where he's this character's within him, and it comes out. So I try and think about it that way. This is this symbiotic relationship. A symbiote, is it? I don't know. But yeah, so I try to think about these things. And I look forward to documenting day by day my progress. And then the idea is to write up a case study on it. Because I've been given a lot of this product, which I showed earlier, and I need to use it all up, really. So it's going to last a long time. You need to dilute it with a lot of water. The instructions I have are all in ounces, which we don't really use in this country, so it's very confusing, that type of measurement. But I will follow it. I'll follow the instructions as it should be. So yeah, you're not supposed to heat it. It ruins the product. And you're supposed to have it at a particular temperature. You can have it cold, but just not hot. And don't have any salts. So you know how you get the ketone salts? That's not what this is. No salt. I want it's the pure product. And so, yeah, I'll see how quickly it raises my ketones. I've only had a similar product a few times in the past, but this is very unique. This is different. I know they use these in the Tour de France and for exercise performance. And there's a lot of research in it in its use with non-communicable diseases like Alzheimer's disease and coronary heart disease, because the heart runs quite efficiently on ketone bodies. So, yeah, interesting. Anyway, I'm going to go now and make sure I have a good sleep. Thank you for watching. Thank you for interacting, and thank you for all your support. It means a lot to me. And goodbye.